Hello, and welcome to Ethanol Producer Magazine's podcast. I'm your host, Katie Schroeder, staff writer with EPM Magazine, and today I am speaking with Mark Yancey, Chief Technology Officer with D3 Max and CEO of SAFFiRE Renewables. At D3 Max, Mark led the effort to develop, pilot test, and commercialize D3 Max's patented corn fiber to ethanol technology. Mark is also the CEO of SAFFiRE Renewables, a subsidiary of D3 Max, created this year to develop and commercialize corn stover to SAF technology. Project SAFFiRE, as this effort is known, received a Department of Energy award to design, build, and operate a 10-ton per day corn stover to ethanol pilot plant. So welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, so to start us off, could you talk about the history of corn fiber ethanol production a little bit and describe the process that D3 Max uses?
Okay. I'll give you a little of the history of D3 Max. There's certainly other companies involved in this space, and I'm not going to attempt to give you their history. But if we go way back in the late 90s, I worked at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and we had a cooperative research and development agreement with Coors Brewing, with the Coors Brewery in Golden, Colorado. And I managed that project for NREL. And we found that spent brewer's grain was a terrific feedstock to make ethanol. And we tested in the laboratory. One of the scientists at NREL said it was the best feedstock that they had ever worked with. And that always stuck in my mind. And that project kind of stopped after that. But years later, Joe Coors called me when I was working then at BBI International and asked if we would restart that project, which we did. And that effort eventually led to BBI submitting a patent application for a process to convert not only spent brewer's grain, but other types of what we call fermentation residuals, which includes corn fiber in ethanol plants, or the wet cake in ethanol plants. That's the residual material after fermentation. So D3 Max ended up with a patent for the conversion of fermentation residuals to ethanol. D3 Max was actually created in 2015, and we went out and raised some money, and with that money we designed and built a small pilot plant. We worked on an agreement with ACE Ethanol in Stanley, Wisconsin, a 50 million gallon a year dry mill ethanol plant. We worked on an agreement where we would install the pilot at their facility, test it, and if they liked it, the intention was that they would build a commercial D3 Max plant. And long story short, all of that worked out. We ran the pilot for most of 2017. ACE said they've seen enough, they liked it, it worked, and they wanted to move forward. So they went through the things they had to do to get board approval and then membership approval. And then in the spring of 2018, we began designing the first commercial D3 Max plant. That's construction started in October of 2018. That went through all of 2019. So construction was finished in December of 2019. And on January 9th of 2020, we started up that D3 Max plant at ACE Ethanol. And that plant has run very well and continues to run. It's running today at ACE Ethanol. So that's the history of D3 Max.
Awesome.
And how the process works. I'll assume our audience knows a little bit about ethanol production, but within a corn dry mill ethanol plant, we have a stream called whole stillage that comes out of the bottom of the distillation column. That whole stillage contains the corn fiber and other residual solids from the fermentation. That goes through a decanter, which is part of the Gen 1 plant. And then the decanter produces what's called wet cake. And that's the feedstock for the D3 Max process. So we take that wet cake, add acid to it, mix the acid in real well. We inject some steam to heat it up to over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. and then it's pumped into a reactor. And this reactor provides the residence time to what I like to say is we cook the wet cake. We cook the carbohydrates at a low pH, and that begins the breakdown of the carbohydrates into fermentable sugars. So after the wet cake moves through the reactor at a specific temperature, specific residence time, it's then discharged to a flash tank. And then it's pumped into what we call a saccharification tank, where we adjust the pH and we add enzymes. And the enzymes complete the breakdown of the carbohydrates into fermentable sugars. So from the saccharification tank, we pump the material into one of four big fermenters, ACE ethanol. These are 220,000 gallon fermentation tanks. And the fermentation takes place there. We use a yeast from Lallemand that ferments all the sugars produced to varying degrees. I should also mention we use an enzyme from Novozymes that works very, very well. But once we do the fermentation, just like the Gen 1 plant, the beer that now has ethanol in it goes to a beer well, which is a large holding tank, and that's pumped to a beer column. The beer column, we heat the beer, the ethanol and water exits the top of the column, and a new whole distillate stream exits the bottom of the beer column. And that stream that comes out of the top has all of the cellulosic ethanol in it. And we run that through a mass flow meter that measures very accurately the amount of ethanol produced by the D3 Max plant. And from there, we can combine that ethanol, send it back to the distillation system of the Gen 1 plant to be further dehydrated, to have more water removed, and then goes to storage and eventually to the shipped out for sale. So
awesome. Yeah. That's great. So could you talk a little bit about kind of what the commercial value of corn fiber ethanol is within the various markets throughout the U.S. and even abroad?
Sure. First I would say that the numbers I'm going to provide change all the time. We all know that ethanol prices go up and down, RIN prices change all the time. So basically, I would say right now, ethanol is worth, let's say, $2 a gallon. It's actually higher than that right now. But the ethanol we make is valued at the same as the Gen 1 ethanol. So we have ethanol as a product, and let's say that sells for $2 a gallon. That ethanol is cellulosic ethanol. So under the RFS, it will generate a D3 RIN. A D3 RIN right now is worth about $3 per gallon. But when you typically, like ACE, will separate the D3 RIN from the ethanol and sell the D3 RIN as essentially a separate product. But you can't sell that ethanol without a RIN. So ACE separates the D3 RIN and has to buy a D6 RIN to put with that gallon. So the net effect of the RFS is if D3 RINs right now are $3 a gallon, D6 RINs are about $1.50, so the net revenue is $1.50 a gallon. So now we have $3.50 a gallon for the cellulosic ethanol. And ACE ships their cellulosic ethanol to California, where it receives low carbon fuel standard credits. And right now, credits there have dropped significantly. They went from about $200 a ton down to $100. But even at $100 a ton, that ethanol generates about 50 cents a gallon. So now we have $4 a gallon of revenue for that cellulosic ethanol. Another benefit of D3 Max is by removing the fiber, it basically frees up more corn oil that's in the ethanol plant. And corn oil is recovered by just about every ethanol plant out there. But by removing the fiber and releasing essentially more corn oil to be recovered, plants can recover more corn oil. And ACE is typically generating about 0.5 pound per bushel of more corn oil with D3 Max than they were prior to D3 Max. And corn oil right now is about 80 cents. I think it's dropped to 60 cents a pound, but that is also
Yeah, that's what I saw. Yeah.
another huge revenue stream for additional distillers' corn oil.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, what markets have you seen throughout the country that seem to be interested in this cellulosic corn fiber ethanol? Are there any new ones that you're seeing kind of pop up within the field, and or existing ones that kind of have been like, such as the California market, that have continued value?
Yeah, I think right now in the immediate past, the California market's been the best place for cellulosic ethanol because of their low carbon fuel standard credits. But we're seeing now a lot of interest from the aviation industry in low carbon sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, SAF. And I know LanzaJet has contacted ACE to see if they can buy their cellulosic ethanol. I don't know exactly where those discussions are right now, but there's certainly a lot of interest in finding and getting under contracts low carbon ethanol that can be upgraded to SAF via what's called the alcohol to jet process. And then so that is a new market, and I think it will be a very, very strong market in the future for ethanol and certainly for low carbon ethanol like the D3 Max ethanol from corn fiber.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of in that vein, regarding sustainable aviation fuel, in light of the growing interest in SAF, do you see potential for even more value to be gained out of corn fiber ethanol?
Yeah, I do. Right now, it's hard to get pricing for SAF unless you're actually involved in those deals, which I am not. But I hear things, and I think SAF right now is in some cases selling for very, very high prices, which I don't think are sustainable. As more SAF is produced, prices will come down and so on. But I expect directing that cellulosic ethanol into the SAF market could generate at least another $1 or $2 per gallon over the $4 that I already mentioned. And of course, it depends on the time frame. Like I said, I think as more SAF is produced, prices will moderate somewhat, but I do think that SAF will end up being a preferred market for low carbon ethanol.
Right. Yeah, that's really exciting. And then, so I'm curious if you know of any impacts that the recent passing of the Inflation Reduction Act could have on corn fiber ethanol, other cellulosic fuels, and sustainable aviation fuel as well, looking into the future.
Sure. Yeah. I think at least for me, because SAFFiRE, where we're developing at ultra low carbon process for SAF, but even for D3 Max ethanol with its low CI, I think that draw to the SAF market will be very strong. But in the IRA, there's the tax credit for sustainable aviation fuel, and that credit varies from $1.50 to $1.75 per gallon, depending on the greenhouse gas reductions of the fuel. So I think that to me, that's the most exciting part of the IRA. Has very direct impact on what we're doing both at D3 Max and SAFFiRE. And there's certainly some other very exciting parts of that legislation, now law, I guess. In general, I think it's just extremely positive for the biofuels industry. It's
great.
It's a great a great thing for biofuels.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.